Bruce Lee was more than just a martial artist. He was a living revolution, a force of nature that tore through tradition, rewrote the rules, and built a philosophy of movement that transcended fighting itself. But what most people don't know, what even many hardcore fans of martial artists miss, is that Bruce Lee had a set of undisclosed training methods, techniques, and philosophies he kept close, shared only with a handful of trusted students, or never documented at all. They weren't flashy, they weren't theatrical, but they were deadly, efficient, revolutionary. The public image of Bruce Lee was that of a sculpted, lightning-fast kung fu master, ripping through opponents with one-inch punches and nunchaku blurs. But that image barely scratches the surface. Bruce didn't just train harder. He trained smarter. He used experimental, even bizarre techniques of the time, blending science, philosophy, and physical intensity in a way that was decades ahead of his time. Behind closed doors, Bruce was obsessed with one thing: total human optimization. Not just strength, not just speed, but control, precision, flow, and most of all, truth. Not the truth found in traditional systems or ancient katas, but the truth discovered through combat, sweat, and total honesty with oneself. One of the most shocking truths is that Bruce Lee didn't believe in styles. He believed in no style as style. That's not just a philosophical quote. It was the foundation of his training. He broke down Wing Chun, Western boxing, fencing, judo, wrestling, and street fighting. And from the rubble, he rebuilt his own process, his own system, which he called Jeet Kune Do. But even within JKD, he constantly evolved. His undisclosed training methods weren't just physical. They were mental frameworks designed to keep him from becoming dogmatic. He kept notebooks, sketches, and diagrams, some of which are still unpublished. In those pages were experiments with timing, biomechanics, psychology, even deception. Bruce was known to tape up tennis balls to the ceiling and use them as timing tools. He'd punch them as they swung unpredictably, forcing himself to adapt and correct mid-movement. He built his own training devices. Mook Jongs altered from traditional Wing Chun designs, resistance machines long before cable systems became mainstream, and pulley-based contraptions to simulate grappling resistance. He wasn't just practicing, he was innovating. His garage was part gym, part laboratory, part dojo, and part temple of obsession. Isometric tension training was one of Bruce's secrets. He would hold powerful stances and poses for minutes, contracting every muscle, sculpting not just his physique, but sharpening his neuromuscular connection. He believed that control over one's own body was the key to controlling any external opponent. He fused this with plyometrics, jumping, exploding, twisting movements, so that his muscles weren't just strong, but trained to release power instantly. This is why his strikes were compact but devastating. He practiced with what he called aliveness. Static forms were not enough. Bruce would often run drills that forced his students to respond to chaotic inputs, random attacks, unexpected grabs, pressure from multiple angles. He was teaching them to think and react like animals. To him, martial arts was not about perfection. It was about function under pressure. He tested techniques not by tradition, but by results. If it didn't work, it was discarded, no matter how ancient or revered the method was. Bruce's daily routine was mind-blowingly disciplined. He'd wake, meditate, stretch, run, lift, train in techniques, write, spar, repeat. He scheduled even his rest periods, reading poetry, philosophy, and science books between sessions to stimulate his mind while letting his body recover. He believed that the body should be an extension of the mind, and that neither could be truly powerful if the other was neglected. His attention to detail was maniacal. He'd trained the same movement thousands of times, not just to perfect it, but to find the variation that worked for him. He'd alter angles by inches, experiment with foot positions, test breathing patterns. He believed there was always a more efficient way. Bruce didn't just want to be good. He wanted to embody mastery. But mastery, for Bruce, wasn't about knowing more. It was about eliminating the unnecessary. Even in his home life, Bruce was training. He would carry hand grippers everywhere. He would punch through air with weights strapped to his wrists. He'd do finger push-ups in his living room, stretch while watching films, and even practice footwork while brushing his teeth. This wasn't compulsive, it was intentional. Every moment was a chance to move better, think faster, strike cleaner. He lived by the principle, long-term consistency trumps short-term intensity. He had custom-made wooden dummies that included metal components to simulate the resistance of bones. He modified punching bags by stuffing them with steel ball bearings to develop wrist alignment and forearm durability. His shin conditioning was brutal. He would roll metal pipes over them, kick trees, slam his legs into heavy bags. He was hardening his body for real combat, not tournament play. His emotional control training was just as intense. He believed that in a fight, panic was death. So he would put himself in high-stress sparring situations. He'd spar multiple opponents, often bigger and more aggressive, while focusing on staying calm, breathing steadily, and using footwork to stay one step ahead. He wasn't just testing his techniques. He was conditioning his nervous system to stay composed when everything screamed chaos. Bruce also practiced silence. For hours, he would train without speaking. No music, no distractions, only breath, movement, and intention. This built a level of mindfulness and connection to movement that most athletes never achieve. He'd sometimes wear blindfolds while drilling forms to heighten his sense of balance and proprioception. His goal was always the same, to eliminate dependence on external stimuli and awaken internal awareness. He explored the science of impact. He'd watch slow-motion footage of strikes to study how force traveled through the body. He tested his own strikes against various surfaces. Would sandbags human bodies. He wanted to feel how energy dispersed, how weight shifted, how timing affected power. This wasn't just about hitting harder. It was about transferring intent through motion. And Bruce wasn't just a student of Eastern practices. He integrated weightlifting into his routine, well before it was accepted in martial arts. He squatted, deadlifted, bench pressed, but always with his own modifications. He aimed for explosive functional strength, not bulk. He'd combine Olympic lifts with calisthenics, shadow boxing with resistance training, and flexibility drills with cardio intervals. He also trained underwater. Shadow boxing while submerged helped him control breathing, strengthen his shoulders, and develop a smoother range of motion. The resistance of the water forced his body to become more efficient with every movement. He even practiced holding his breath while performing rapid strikes, a form of physical and psychological endurance testing few dare attempt. Another little-known truth, Bruce recorded himself constantly. He'd review tapes of his training sessions, sparring footage, even casual movements. Bruce also built what he called recovery strength. It's one thing to throw a punch. It's another to recover fast enough to throw the next before your opponent reacts. He trained muscle recoil, rotational flexibility, and tendon strength to ensure that every move set up the next. He wasn't thinking one punch ahead. He was thinking in sequences, anticipating not just action but reaction. He even incorporated dance into his training. Footwork from cha-cha-cha, rhythm from jazz movement. It all became part of his fighting style. He knew that combat wasn't just raw power. It was rhythm, timing, expression. Bruce believed that movement should be beautiful and effective at once. To him, style and substance weren't opposites. They were partners. Perhaps the most haunting part of Bruce's hidden training philosophy was this. He trained as if he had no time left, as if every day was his last. That urgency is what pushed him beyond the norm. He didn't wait for the perfect program, the perfect teacher, or the perfect environment. He used what he had, where he was, and turned himself into a machine of movement. That's the real secret to Bruce Lee's undisclosed methods. It wasn't one technique. It wasn't one trick. It was the total immersion into his craft, the rejection of limitation, the courage to experiment, the willingness to suffer in pursuit of mastery. Bruce didn't chase perfection. He chased truth. And the truth is, behind every spectacular kick and every unforgettable scream was a man who worked, studied, and trained like no one else. One of the most shocking truths is that Bruce Lee didn't believe in styles. He believed in no style is style. That's not just a philosophical quote. It was a foundation of his training. He broke down Wing Chun, Western boxing, fencing, judo, wrestling, and street fighting. And from the rubble, he rebuilt his own process, his own system, which he called Jeet Kune Do. But even within JKD, he constantly evolved. His undisclosed training methods weren't just physical. They were mental frameworks designed to keep him from becoming dogmatic. He kept notebooks, sketches, and diagrams, some of which are still unpublished. In those pages were experiments with timing, biomechanics, psychology, even deception. One of the more mysterious methods Bruce employed was isometric tension training, something he rarely talked about publicly. He would stand in poses, sometimes for minutes at a time, contracting his muscles with maximal effort without moving an inch. This wasn't for aesthetics. It was for neurological priming. Bruce knew that strength wasn't just about muscles. It was about the nervous system. The brain had to fire faster. The body had to obey quicker. He trained his nervous system to operate at lightning speeds, which is why, even at 140 pounds, he could hit with more force than men twice his size. Another hidden aspect of his training was visualization. Bruce would visualize himself fighting multiple opponents, running through scenarios in his head like a chess master. He believed in training the subconscious as much as the body. While others were lifting weights or punching bags, Bruce was in deep mental rehearsals. He'd walk through a fight moment by moment, analyzing every movement, every reaction. He didn't just train his muscles. He programmed his reactions. This is what gave him his surreal timing and economy of motion. There's also his use of reaction time drills. Bruce was obsessed with minimizing the time between perception and action. One method he practiced involved a simple coin. He'd place it on someone's hand and tell them to close it before he could grab the coin. Almost no one could. Why? Because Bruce didn't wait for the visual cue. He anticipated intention. He trained to read micro-movements, shifts in energy, tension in the body. He studied fencing for this reason, the concept of intercepting, not just attacking. The art of fighting without fighting wasn't just a line, it was a strategy. Perhaps one of the most shocking truths is that Bruce Lee used electrical muscle stimulation in the 1960s. Long before it became common in sports science, Bruce hooked himself up to machines that sent electrical impulses through his muscles. He did this while doing other exercises to increase load and intensity. He read Soviet sports science journals, studied Western physiology texts, and talked to anyone he could in the field of kinesiology. He was blending East and West before it was a trend. And what about his cardio? Bruce didn't just run. He ran backward. He sprinted in zigzags. He wore a 50-pound weighted vest during runs, do high-knee skipping drills, shadow box with resistance bands tied to his arms. And when he was indoors, he'd shadow box in front of a mirror for hours, not to admire himself, but to study angles, correct mistakes, and develop what he called broken rhythm. He didn't want to be predictable. He wanted to move like water, unreadable, unstoppable. In private, Bruce would train his reflexes using flashing lights. He had setups where a light would blink at random intervals, and he had to strike a target before the light went off. He was building a feedback loop between his eyes, brain, and limbs, trying to close the delay between input and output. This wasn't kung fu. It wasn't movie choreography. It was neurotraining. And no one else in the martial arts world was doing it at the time. Let's not forget his grip strength obsession. Bruce believed that your grip was a reflection of your internal energy and explosive potential. He used grippers, rice buckets, towels, and even trained with thick bamboo rods. His forearm and finger strength were out of this world. That's why his 1-inch punch worked. It wasn't just technique. It was a combination of kinetic chain mastery, explosive intent, and raw grip power transferring to his whole body like a whip. Bruce also experimented with breath control, not just a meditation. But in combat, he studied yogic breathing, pranayama, and used it to control his heart rate, regulate adrenaline, and stay calm under pressure. He trained in silence sometimes, wearing earplugs to focus only on his breath and movement. To Bruce, the breath was a bridge between mind and body, a weapon just as powerful as a fist. There's another lesser-known practice Bruce used, mirror sparring. He'd stand in front of a mirror and pretend it was a live opponent, using it to analyze not just his form but his reactions. If he feinted with one hand, how would he naturally counter? What would an opponent see? It was a psychological game. Bruce was training himself to read the opponent while being unreadable himself. And nutrition? Forget the trendy diets of today. Bruce didn't follow fads. He designed his own meal plans based on energy output. He blended raw liver shakes, added ginseng, royal jelly, vitamins B pollen, protein powders, and more. He ate lean, mostly Asian-style meals, but constantly experimented with nutrient timing. He'd often eat small, frequent meals to maintain energy without bogging down digestion. Everything was fine-tuned to his training cycles. One of the strangest and most telling training methods Bruce used was scream training. That iconic "what-ah" wasn't just for movies. Bruce used sound to activate his nervous system. The yell focused his breath, tightened his core, and amplified his strike. It wasn't noise. It was force projection. A warrior's cry meant to compress all energy into a single devastating burst. Bruce also kept detailed journals about what he called emotional control drills. He would intentionally frustrate himself during training, misplace equipment, set alarms at weird intervals, or even wear uncomfortable gear to simulate chaos. Why? Because in a real fight, nothing is clean. He trained his mind to stay calm even when everything was going wrong. To Bruce, the ability to remain centered while in the middle of the storm was the mark of a true fighter. He also practiced blind sparring, where he'd wear a blindfold and try to read opponents through touch, sound, and intuition. He'd move around a mat with a partner, using only sensitivity drills, contact reflexes, and pressure cues to predict and respond to attacks. This wasn't a show. It was about cultivating the kind of instinct that doesn't rely on sight. Real combat is fast. You don't always see the punch coming. Bruce trained to feel the fight. Bruce's love for fencing, especially the concept of the stop hit and intercepting attack, influenced some of his most effective techniques. The idea wasn't just a hit, it was to hit first. But hitting first isn't about speed. It's about reading the intent and cutting it off before it manifests. He drilled this by having students telegraph a punch ever so slightly, and he'd aim to strike just as they began. His whole body was trained to fire like a coiled spring, always ready, always loaded. Even in silence, Bruce trained. Meditation wasn't a luxury for him. It was a tool. He'd meditate to slow his breath, clear his thoughts, and visualize not just success, but effortless motion. In those quiet moments, he'd deconstruct every part of a kick, a block, a strike, then mentally rehearse it until it became second nature. This wasn't mysticism. It was biomechanics paired with neuroscience. Bruce was hacking his brain. The shocking truth is that Bruce Lee's greatest weapon wasn't his speed, his strength, or his skill. It was his mindset. He believed in breaking limits. He didn't just train for hours. He lived training. Every movement, every breath, every second of his day was an opportunity to grow. He took notes obsessively, asked questions constantly, and never accepted good enough. That's what made him dangerous. Not his fists, but the mind that wielded them. Bruce Lee's undisclosed training methods weren't magic tricks. They were the product of obsession, curiosity, and relentless experimentation. He refused to be bound by tradition, yet he respected all that came before. He was a warrior scientist, a philosopher-athlete, and a man who believed that the greatest fight is not against an opponent, but against oneself. And that is the real reason Bruce Lee is still legendary. Not because he was strong, not because he was fast, but because he was willing to go where no one else dared, into the unknown corners of the human potential. And in doing so, he left behind a blueprint, a challenge, a truth, one we're only just beginning to understand.